for the, I think this, are you guys, for the third class, so it's been going around for a while. So, and it's still warm from opening it up like that. Am I in camera now?
Yeah.
I just got water holding myself. Right here. Good morning, everyone. My name is Noelle Kay, for those of you who don't know me. I am going to teach you about Wonderbox and Icebox cooking. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of that terminology before, but icebox cooking is otherwise known as heat retention, retained heat cooking, fireless cooking, haybox cooking, icebox cooking, Wonderbox cooking. Basically, what heat retention cooking is in an emergency, you have a very limited supply of fuel. Whether you're going to use a rocket stove, whether you're going to use a propane stove, whether you're going to use charcoal briquettes, whatever modality you're going to use to heat your food, you have to conserve your fuel. And so what you can do to conserve fuel is you can use an ice cooler here. You can use this device, which we call a Wonderbox. You can use something as simple as a laundry basket and some blankets and sleeping bag to make a retained cooker. The basic things you need for, say, something like an ice box here. Inside the ice box on the very bottom is just a folded up towel, and then placed on top of that is a wool blanket, and then on top of the wool blanket you put your pot, and then on top of your pot you will put just a pillow. The main key, whether you're going to use something like a Wonderbox or whether you're going to use an ice chest for your retained cooker, you want to make sure that you have as little airspace as possible. That will be able to cook your food a lot better and retain the heat in it as well. For making this is a Wonderbox. You can see here, inside this material here is, it's just, it's not sawdust, it's more like wood chip, you know, like saw chips. I just picked it up at the feed store. I bought a 3 cubic bag of this saw chips for about $14 at the feed store. And you could probably, I haven't finished filling my my bags, you could probably make 3 of these with that one bag of the saw chips here. You can stuff this with wool, you can stuff it with straw, you can stuff it with rice hulls. You can also use polystyrene beads. Now, I had a hard time finding this around town and finding a place online to buy it. Basically what this is it is beanbag filler. I found this tall bag at Kmart and it was $15. I made one Wonderbox with it, and I had this left over from it. The great thing about polystyrene, it's not my favorite thing to use, but it's very good at retaining heat. Also, if you make a Wonderbox, you can wash your Wonderbox. You would wash it and then you would hang dry it. Sometimes when you're cooking, you know, you might spill things in your Wonderbox. You're not going to be able to, if you have, you know, your chips there, you're not going to be able to wash this, but you can wash something made with this.
So you just leave the beets in there?
The beads, no, it's actually, I
you wash
shoved them. Uh-huh.
When you wash it?
Oh yeah, you're gonna take it out, because they're sewn into here.
Okay.
This is actually the Wonderbox without the stuffing in it. And you'll leave a little hole here, and you'll use a funnel to put your, whatever you're gonna use to insulate your Wonderbox. You have this hole here, and then you just hand sew this. But that's what I did, is I just shoved the beads in there. Whether you're using a cooler or whether you're using a Wonderbox, before I begin my cooking, I pick my pot out. Now the key, what you want to do is you want as little airspace in your pot as well. So if you're gonna cook a big amount of food, you'll use a big pot, but if you're gonna use a small amount of food, you wanna use a smaller pot so that your food will cook better and it'll retain the heat better as well. And you also wanna just kind of, beforehand, I just kind of play with my cooker, or I play with the inside of the cooler so I can make a little hole for it beforehand. So, because sometimes you use different pots, they're different sizes. I made pinto beans. Normally when you make beans, it takes you hours to cook. But with the retained cooker, you can take the beans, soak them overnight, rinse them, sort them, and then the next morning, I rinse them off again. I put them in the strainer, rinse the beans off again, and then I put my fresh water in the pot. If you want any seasonings, you can add seasonings to it. And then you just put it on the stovetop. You're not going to be able to cook the, you're not going to be able to keep the lid on the entire time because it'll boil over and make a big mess. But the key is at least for the last couple of minutes of cooking, you want to keep the lid on your food. Whether you're cooking rice, whether you're cooking chicken, anything that you're cooking, you want to keep the lid on because that's going to keep the steam inside, that's going to keep the heat inside, and that is what's going to finish cooking your food. So all I did with my beans is I put them in a pot with water, put it on the stove, let it cook for 15 minutes, that's it. You want to make sure that whatever you're using, whether you're using an ice box or a Wonder Box or something else, you want to have it close on hand. It's relatively close to wherever you're cooking. That way you can retain as much heat as possible. So what it is, I just cook the beans for 15 minutes, take it directly to the Wonder Box, close it up, and I let it sit there. A couple hours later I came back and I had cooked beans. I mean, it really doesn't take that much longer than what it would normally do on a stovetop. You have to just kind of experiment. What I started out doing is, because I haven't been doing this too long, but I started just doing single ingredient recipes. That way I wasn't wasting food, and that way I can experiment. If my experiment failed, I didn't lose out too much on it. I've cooked rice. I found with retained cookers, this kind of a pot is great for solar cooking, but I found it's for my retained cooking, it was actually better to use like just your regular kitchen pots. It was a heavier pot, especially for cooking rice, because I would burn it in this, because this is too thin for rice. But the biggest thing is whatever pot you're using, you want to make sure that you are using something without a handle, because it's going to obstruct, you're going to get a gap in here, and you're going to have heat loss. So a short stubby handle is fine, or pots with no handles are preferred. But if you need to, a short stubby handle is just fine for cooking. Let's see here. You want to make sure whether you're using your ice box or this, you want to have it as snug as possible. Now, when I use the ice chest, I just stick my pot in there. I wrapped my blanket around it, and then I put a pillow on top. You can pick up these wool blankets. You can pick them at a garage sale. You can pick them up at the Goodwill. You can pick it up at surplus stores. I picked mine up at my mom's garage. She wasn't using this. If you don't have wool, if you're allergic to wool, you don't have to use it. I mean, wool does retain heat a lot better than anything else. But I have successfully used just a regular cotton towel. Whatever you're going to use inside your ice chest, you want to be sure that it's a material that when you put your pot next to it, it's not going to melt onto the pot. So you want to have preferably like a natural fiber like cotton or wool, something that's not going to melt next to it. But I have successfully used towels and just wrapped around. The main thing is you want to keep, you want to fill it up enough where you're not going to have air pockets in your cooler. So that's the key. So just make sure you can experiment beforehand. What I did is before I did any kind of cooking, I just did a dry run with the empty pot in there, wrapping things up to see if I had enough, if I had enough stuff in there to keep it with no air pockets. Let's see here. If you're using a solar oven, you have a very limited time that you can cook. you've got a very short hours. But what you can do is, if you want to cook a nice hot meal, and you start out in the morning time and you're cooking multiple things, you can cook your food in the solar oven, and then as soon as you're done cooking it in the solar oven, directly put it in a Wonder Box or put it in your ice chest. Wrap it all up, and it'll keep your food warm until dinner time. It'll keep it nice and warm. So I have, we're a family of 7, so I have multiple Wonder Boxes and multiple coolers. I found that this is the best type to use because it's tall, so you can fit a tall pot in here. But I have some ice chests that are down to here, that are much farther lower to the ground, that I can use a small pot with, and I've successfully done retained cooking with that as well. I've picked up a lot of my coolers at garage sales. I mean, you don't have to have a fancy, expensive cooler. You can have just a simple cooler. You just want something with insulation. I've seen someone take a laundry basket and they put a sleeping bag in the laundry basket. Then they put a wool blanket on top of that. Then they take the pot. They'll use I've seen them do I watched a video online. They took a Dutch oven, cooked their beans in the Dutch oven on the stove, and then take that directly and put it in their laundry basket, wrapped it up with your blankets, and just stuck it in that. I don't think I would, do this one, but I've seen people in a bowl. They had a big bowl where they put the blankets in or the towels in, wrapped it up and stuck it in the oven, if you have an oven, because that'll keep the, it's kind of airtight in there, and you can keep, it's good for retaining heat as well. So you can find different ways of using retention heaters. If you have, it's hard to find here nowadays, but there's some places where they have the old rice bags, used rice containers, and you can take 2 of those and put, the plasticky type, the old rice bags, and you can stick 2 in each side, and then in between the 2 layers, you can stuff it with wool, with cotton, whatever you want as insulation. Put a pillow down in that and wrap it up and use that as a retain cooker. You can also use your ice chest, or you can use a Wonder Box for keeping your food cold. And if you want to keep things cold. I travel down to LA to the Korean market a lot, and sometimes I kind of buy too many things and I don't have enough space in my cooler. And this last week I happened to have my Wonder Box with me as well. So I had some frozen items. I just had it in a plain grocery bag, wrapped up, stuck it in my Wonder Box. It was during those warmer days. It was in the car for 3 hours in a warm car, and it was still frozen by the time I made it back home here. So I've heard of people putting ice cream in a Wonder Box and wrapping it up, and it's still frozen. I haven't tried that yet, but I've heard people be successful in that. So you can use these for cooling as well, for keeping your food cool. So they have multiple uses. Let's see here. You can I've made chicken in here. I've heard of you can put a whole chicken. I haven't done that. I did 4 chicken breasts. I took the chicken breasts, I put them in an oven roasting bag, wrapped it up really well, twist tied it, and then I put it in a pot of water. I had it's sealed bag, so it wasn't going to be soggy. Had the chicken in a sealed roasting bag, stuck in a pot of water, put it on the stove for 10 minutes, let it cook for 10 minutes, and immediately place it in here. Came back a couple hours later. I put the seasonings in the roasting bag as well, seasoned it how I wanted it. Came back a couple hours later and I had cooked chicken. Thoroughly cooked chicken breast. So there's different things that you can do with it. You can make bread with it. I wasn't quite successful with it. The consistency, and it was just fine, and it was thoroughly cooked, but I think I did the yeast a little too wrong, and it had this alcohol smell to it, so it didn't work quite out the way I wanted it. But you can make it. You can use a cereal bag. The cereal bags that come, the little plastic cereal bags. You put your dough in there, tie it up real well so you don't get any water in that. Stick it in a roasting bag again, twist tie that, and put that in your pot of boiling water. Put it on the stove for 10 minutes, let it cook, and then put it in your Wonder Box or put it in your ice chest and it'll cook. Or I did put it in a mason jar and it worked. I didn't have any explosions, I didn't have anything pop off. You just pan it first, whether you're using the cereal wrapping to it or whether you're using a mason jar. I just put Pam on it. And then what I did is I put my mason jar sideways in my pot, filled it with water, brought it to a boil for 10 minutes, and then stuck it in the cooler, I put some in my Wonder Box, and it cooked all the way through. But like I said, I need to tweak it because I didn't do something quite right because of the yeast, but I've heard you can make it successfully in it, so that's a way of making bread, because you don't always have the sun oven when you don't have sun. Sometimes you don't have other ways of doing it, so that's just another way of making bread as an alternative. You just got to experiment with things. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try. But like I said, the best thing I did is just a single ingredients. Just started out that way. You guys have any questions?
Where do we get the patterns?
I will give all the information to Debbie, and she'll forward that to you with her email that she sends, and also it'll be uploaded to her. She actually has this pattern on her website. It's the Wonder Box pattern. But I'm going to make different directions because I had a little difficulty reading the directions, and so I'm going to make it a little more simpler. Once you know how to do it, it's really simple to do. I mean, it's only 4 pieces on each. So that's all it is. It's really simple to do if I can just tweak the directions for you. But this is actually on her website, and it's called the Wonder Box pattern.